Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, which is Understand Your Product, Combining Google Analytics Data with CARTO and BigQuery. My name's Sarah Butler. I'm moderating today's webinar and I work with the Liveli team in the marketing department. Just a few things that we need to get through this morning with regards to how to use GoToWebinar, just a little bit of housekeeping. So as an attendee, you are in listen only mode. This means that you don't need to connect your microphone, but you can still ask questions, which we'll get onto. We recommend a high speed wide internet connection and just using your computer audio to listen, and a USB headset will obviously give you the best quality sound. You can use the audio panel to ensure you have the correct settings for the call. And the important thing about today, guys, is that if you have any questions, we're going to be able to ask the panelists at the end of the webinar. So in your control panel, you'll see on the little diagram on the left-hand side of the screen, it gives you the ability to ask us a question, which will come through to me, and then I will share that with our panelists. You can collapse your panel view using the orange arrow on the top left-hand side of your control panel. We are recording the webinar today, so you'll receive the recording shortly after the webinar is aired, and we do encourage, if you want to share that around with your colleagues, you can do so. And if you want to leave the webinar at any time, just use the close X button in the top right-hand corner of your control panel. And now that we've gotten all the boring housekeeping stuff out of the way, we can get into the really exciting stuff. And we are really excited about today because our relationship at Liveli with Data Runs Deep has been quite a long one now. So we've known those guys for a while, and I think we've been wanting to do this webinar for quite some time. The thing that it's proved to us is when two Google Cloud partners, join up together, really cool things can happen. So Data Runs Deep came to Liveli a little while ago because they had a set of clients, their Google for Marketing partners and Google Cloud partners as well. And some of their clients had some issues with being able to track their Google Maps usage and needed a billing partner for their Google Maps. So they looked for a partner that specialized in location intelligence and was a Google Maps Premier partner, and that's how we found each other. So this whole, partnership that we had with Data Runs Deep stemmed the idea for this webinar, and we had a conversation quite a while ago with Damien, who spoke with some of our team members about the limited visualization, I guess, that you see out of the box with Google Analytics. And like I said, this is quite some time ago, but somehow Dion and I found out about this idea, and we were like, no, maybe there's something we can do with that. But as usual, it took about like 10 months for us to actually get started with the idea. Life gets in the way, things like pandemics happen, and you wonder if you're ever going to get round to it. But we didn't give up on that. And we started thinking about it again more recently when Ash, who's on our webinar today, came to Perth. And he met with our team, in particular, Jamie and Brendan, who helped get this demo together today. And we started talking about how can we actually take the location data that sits within Google Analytics and really do something special with it, because there is so much information there that's a little bit underutilized. But the thing was, we needed to work with somebody who had, a good story to tell, who really relied on Google Analytics. So we went back to Ash and the Data Runs Deep team, and we said to them, who do you guys know that would be really into this experiment that we're doing? Because we just wanted to have a play around. We get excited about data. So we needed the data that actually ran deep. And that's when Mark came in from Red Balloonâ and the Big Red Group. So Mark has been an absolute champion throughout this. He has been able to give us access to some sample data sets from their Google Analytics account, but also some supplementary data sets to help connect the dots in a way and tell some really interesting stories. And then these arrows just go a bit berserk and we go left, right, and center, and we come up with a really, really awesome solution, which kind of looks like this. So this little GIF here shows you what you see in Google Analytics out of the box versus what we were able to show in CARTO, which we're going to go through the process of today. And the results are really quite compelling. But I think the one thing that we're going to be focusing on today, and this is at a very high level, the guys will go into a lot more detail about this, is understanding what's in your Google Analytics data. There's a wealth of information in there that you guys use every day, but there's also location elements attached to pretty much all pieces of those data, those data sets. So the stories you can tell on a map with that information is pretty amazing. We're bringing the data into Google BigQuery, which is Google's data warehousing solution. And it's super fast, and it's also really inexpensive to run queries in there. But for us, it's all about speed and being able to query that data really quickly. Understanding the data within BigQuery and really knowing what questions to ask and what you need the answers for when you get it into CARTO. And then accessing the data in CARTO using the BigQuery connector for CARTO to begin spatial analysis and answer your questions in just a few clicks. So that brings me on to our speakers today. So we have Dion, who is the CARTO consultant at Liveli. We have Ash, the principal analytics consultant from Data Runs Deep, and Mark, the head of data at the Big Red Group. So I guess all of us together with Jamie and with Brendan, we've been working away at this and nerding out a bit. We're really excited to show you what we've done. So on the agenda, we're going to start with Ash, who's going to talk about Google Analytics and GA360 and what's possible for businesses with that. Then we're going to move on to Mark, who's going to talk about making informed decisions with data and a little bit about how the Big Red Group uses Google Analytics to make decisions. And then we're going to move over to Dion, who's going to show some recordings and some demos of what the data ended up looking like in CARTO and the stories and use cases that we're looking at. And then we'll have time for some questions and answers. So like I said, please, throughout the webinar, if something pops into your mind, do put it in the questions part of your control panel, and I will be able to ask our panelists at the end of the call. So now we're going to go across to Ash, who's going to talk about Google Analytics. So Ash, over to you.
Awesome, thank you for that. So I think I'll start with how does Google Analytics work from a very high level view. Initially, it will start with when a user would come to a website or uses an app. On the website, there is a small script that needs to run, and that'll fire a cookie, and that'll store that cookie on that user's machine. Now, depending if that cookie exists previously or it's freshly created, that is how Google Analytics determines if this is a new user or a returning. From that cookie, a hit record is created and sent to the Google Analytics servers. And then depending on which version of Google Analytics you have, whether you're a free or standard user or whether you're a 360 user, depends on how long that processing will take. For a standard user, it takes anywhere from 24 to 48 hours to process, whereas with the GA360 customer, it is guaranteed to be processed within 4 hours. Once the data is processed and stored and pre-aggregated, that is when it becomes available for reporting in either the user interface or the API. And today we're going to cover how we leverage the API to extract the data out of analytics and help visualize it in a different manner. So I'll just jump to the next slide. When a hit is sent, when a record is sent, there is piece of information that is stored that can be set at 3 different scope levels. The user level, which means that that piece of information applies to anything that user does across their journey. So for example, if you have a login system and you can assign a user ID, you would assign that at the user scope. So that way, every action that is tracked against that user has the same user ID going forward. The next level is session, meaning what did they do at that particular point in time on your website in their journey. So for example, the traffic source they came from, whether it was organic search, an email, a social campaign, that information generally won't change mid-session. So that's why we can set it once and have it apply to every hit that is generated in that session. And then finally, we have the hit level, which applies to that particular action. So for example, at a page view level, so when someone loads a page, the title of that page will be the same for that particular page. And so that way we can set it at a hit level. So if we just go to the next slide, what we can start to see is what is actually available out of the box. So just by having the basic code of Google Analytics on your site, what are some statistics and numbers you can pull out? So here we have a geolocation report mapped against the channels report. So we're looking at which traffic channels did users use to come to this particular website, as well as cross-referencing which city that those users are based in. And in this quick example, we can actually see at the very bottom there, Perth users using organic search have a significantly higher bounce rate compared to the site average. So that could be an area of focus for this particular business. If you go to the next slide, we start to see some of the limitations of this particular view of the data. So for one, because this is a standard or free Google Analytics account, we can see that the data is sampled, and I'm actually only looking at roughly 68% of the data. The rest is then sampled and estimated. The other thing we can see is at the very bottom there, I'm looking at the rows 1 to 10 of nearly 7,000 rows. So as a person, I would be struggling to kind of come up with any sort of analysis based on 7,000 rows worth of data just by using my eyes. So what we can do is we can actually export this data, and depending on which version of Google Analytics you have, depends on which way you'll export that data. From a standard user's perspective, you can either export the data as a CSV file right from this report, or, as I'll show you soon, you can use third-party tools to export the data via the API. And we'll talk about in a second why that might be better than just exporting this CSV. As a Google Analytics 360 customer, there are actually pre-existing functions which will give you direct access to the raw data. So the first function is you can export an unsampled report that will send you a CSV file with all the raw data. Or there is an integration between Google Analytics 360 and Google BigQuery, which automatically exports the raw hit level data into BigQuery. And as Dion will explain later, that can then be directly pushed into Cartio. So if you just go to the next slide, this is one of the tools that we use. It's using the R script language, where you can programmatically access or script the ability to access the UI, the API for Google Analytics. And you create your own script. This is completely free. You can use the existing package within R, which is the Google Analytics package, which allows you to specifically say, I want dimension X, Y, and Z against metric A, B, and C. And then there's a specific function within the R package which enables you to turn anti-sampling on. And what that will do is it will make the initial request, check if there is a likelihood that that request is going to be sampled, and then it will automatically reduce the date range, then check for sampling again. If it is sampled, it will keep on doing that iterative process until it finds a date range small enough where it will get no sampling, export that data, then reapply that same process automatically for the entire date range. So you can see, if you can see in this example, we use the script to extract 3 months worth of data, which normally, if I was just using the user interface, I would be heavily sampled. So this is how we actually extract the data into a CSV format. We then passed it over to the Liveli team, who uploaded it into BigQuery and then worked their magic. And that's all from me.
Thank you so much, Ash. We're going to now pass over to Mark Grace from the Big Red Group, and he's going to share with us a little bit about using data sets to make decisions. So over to you, Mark.
Cool. Morning / afternoon, all depending where you are. I'm here in Sydney. So I'll start with just a little bit of who we are, who BRG are, before, as we say, we get onto Dion talking about the actual demo. So our vision is to sustainably deliver an experience every second somewhere on Earth. And what's an experience? Experiences are very broad. They could be anything from a skydive or a hot air balloon ride to like a beach horse ride. That we sell all sorts of things. We see ourselves as a marketplace, and we've got the supply side where the whole aim is about creating amazing experiences and building great relationships with our suppliers. Demand side is all about finding the right audience, connecting the right audience to the right brand at the right time. And in the middle is our world-class tech stack and e-commerce experience. And we go to market with 3 consumer brands, that being Red Balloonâ, which is the most well-known one here in Australia, Adrenaline, and Lime and Tonic, and Ready as our corporate offering. Albert is AI digital marketing platform that we leverage here as well. So that's a little bit about who we are. In terms of our data stack, we obviously have all of our websites and products, but we also have loads of other data sources on the right-hand side, which we collect data from as well. So whether that be a CRM, email marketing, blah, 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 blah. On the left-hand side, I talk about event layers and analytics layers, and on the right, I talk about data transformation and data warehousing. But ultimately, that results in us as a business being able to do the 7 things here. And this is what I spend my time talking and talking to business users on, and helping our SLT, our leadership team, think about how we leverage data in these areas to support us grow as a business. So I talk in terms of marketing analytics, our ability to understand how customers engage with our marketing activity, and I have a constant battle about how marketing analytics and product analytics are different, but I think fundamentally they are. Experimentation is our ability to try new things, learn and iterate as we go. And personalization is obviously a key part of that around creating unique interactions with every customer throughout their relationship with us. On the right-hand side, I'm using the data warehouse to do reporting, insight, which I talked to about the deepening our understanding, of customers and our business, and then model development as in our ability to build data assets, which influence what and how we do things. In terms of GA and what we use GA for, we use it across 4 main areas really: reporting, insight, and then product and marketing analytics. But it's not perfect for us. It can't do everything. I see really there's 4 main challenges for us in what GA does. And on the next slide, I talk to them. Yeah. So here we are. So for me, what GA doesn't do is it's never going to be a financial system of record for us. And sometimes as a business, we get a bit carried away with what GA is telling us. We're within 5%, and I'm really happy with that. As Ash spoke to already, it doesn't provide us access to unsampled data. We're on the free version, so we can get caught out here if we don't have another place to store it in an unsampled way. It can't provide us that holistic view, so it doesn't give us the ability to link everything together. So having that data warehouse, which collects data from all of our other sources, whether that be a CRM, email marketing tool, whatever it might be, is really useful for us. And that links closely with a great insight tool. Like, I love GA. I'm a big advocate of it and the power it has. And I'm trying to get all of our business users to use it more maturely. But it isn't always the best tool to be conducting deep insight in, and especially when it comes to location data, which is kind of how we got onto the discussion. So as you can imagine, for us, location is everything. People will only travel to certain places, and it's such a rich piece of information that's critical for us understanding how BRG can grow. So these are the types of questions that I took to the Liveli team, and types of questions that I ask myself and my team on a regular basis. But how are our products distributed across the country? Like, what's our next? Where do we go next? Where are we missing stuff? Where are people searching for things that we don't have supply for? Next one is kind of where people are when they visit our website, and does the shopping funnel look different by location? I think a fascinating one is, do we see the demand for product vary by city versus non-metro customers? And how does it, like, how far are people traveling to go on their experiences? All of this influences what we do. So, you know, we're constantly on the lookout for amazing new product. And in a post-COVID environment, it's going to be fascinating to see how this all changes. What Dion's about to go into and show is pre-COVID world, but we're really fascinated to see how this all changes post the new world that we find ourselves in now. So yeah, I hope that gives you a brief overview of who BRG are and kind of some of the questions that we had of this data.
Thank you so much, Mark. Now we're going to pass straight over to Dion, because I know he's got some demos that he's pretty excited to share with you guys. And what we're going to be looking at is going to be really answering those final questions there that Mark addressed. So Dion, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Sarah. So what I'll do, like Sarah mentioned, I'll be showing through a few demos and sort of the end output of the work that we did together with DRD and Big Red Group. But first, I'll just take you through the process a little bit. So the first thing is just getting an understanding of where the data came from and then where it ended up. So you can see it up in the top left. So essentially, it began with the Google Analytics data from DRD and Big Red Group. And so what we did is push that into BigQuery, which is Google's data warehouse. So it's enabled us to explore the data, to take a look at the data that we're going to get out and push into a map. So we sort of use that as a bit of a playground or a sandbox, just to have a look at the data and see what location information we could get out. Once we were happy with that, we then utilized a connector that's been built by the CARTO team, which is the BigQuery connector. And that enables you to plug directly into your BigQuery tables and then utilize that data within your CARTO database. So that you can see the next step there is pushing it into the CARTO database that actually lives on the Google Cloud platform. So we push the data into there, and then once it's in the CARTO database, you have many options in terms of how you want to analyze and visualize it. And so there's a couple of examples there of those sort of interfaces that you would see for the data that's come out of the database. And then just down the bottom there, the Big Red Group product data warehouse. So this is something that Mark touched on earlier. And so that was used, so that's purely just product information. So things around the location of a product or an experience, if you want to call it. So where do people partake in that experience? So that data came from a separate warehouse. We pushed that into the CARTO database as well. And then we sort of amalgamated them together in there, and then you'll see in some of the demos the combination of the two of them. So the BigQuery process, so the first part of it, like I mentioned, was exploring the data. So I've just got a screenshot there of a little bit of exploration we did. So this is an example of some of the work that Brendan and myself did, just exploring the data. So looking through at the data that we'd received from Google Analytics, looking at the location information that it had in there, and what the outputs were looking like. So we used that BigQuery console within the Google Cloud platform to explore the data initially. And then the next step was once we were happy with our queries, we then utilized the CARTO connector, which is on the right-hand side of the screen. So we connect into our tables. We run the same SQL queries. So that's the beauty of BigQuery, is that it's really simple SQL query language. And yeah, then we're able to run the queries, get the data into CARTO, and then start to visualize it and run analysis and that sort of thing. So then what I'll do now is just briefly take you through the CARTO platform. So once we've got the data out of BigQuery, we then need to push it into the CARTO platform, which is where we're sort of up to. And so just generally, what is CARTO for those that haven't come across it? So what it is a location intelligence platform. So they see themselves as taking it beyond just business intelligence, like your Tableaus and Power BIs, and taking it a step further with spatial. So the whole focus of the application is geographic data, and so everything's built around that. So what it enables you to do is to upload your data and manage it, enrich it. So whether you're geocoding information or addresses, or whether you're adding other data streams into the data set, so there may be other third-party information that you want to add, then you can analyze it and visualize it. And so the three sort of images or platforms you see there are the three sort of most common ways that people consume CARTO information or the CARTO data. So there's Builder, Engine, and CARTO Frames. The one we'll be using today is CARTO Builder. But yeah, CARTO Engine essentially gives you a little bit more customization, and yeah, there's a lot more control for the user. And then CARTO Frames is actually a dedicated data science library, so you can run it from a data science notebook. So that's sort of the three main ways, but as I said, we'll be using CARTO Builder. So that's the one that you'll see in the demos. So why did we choose CARTO for this? There's really three key points. One is that it's a really powerful visualization tool for spatial data. And in the future, we may look to do more analytics with this sort of data. So there's a lot of potential there within the platform. The second one is looking at the ability to push the Google Analytics data into BigQuery. And we knew that there was a BigQuery connector. into CARTO. So it meant that it was really easy for us to get the data from essentially from Big Red Group and Data Runs Deep and get it into CARTO really quickly. So that combination of CARTO Builder and the BigQuery connector, it meant that it was really easy for us to prototype very quickly. So we had probably 10 or so different variants of the maps. We were able to sort of play around with what we thought had to tell the best stories and gave the best insight. And then we sort of narrowed it down to a couple to show here today. So that was sort of the reason behind why we chose CARTO. The process that we took, so there's sort of a standard 5-step process that CARTO, that most CARTO projects or applications would go through. So the first one is the ingestion and management of data. So like I've just run through previously, we use the CARTO connector into BigQuery. So that's how we got our data, and that pushes it into CARTO's fully managed spatial database. And then that gives us the ability to manage the data, ensure that there's automatic backups and that sort of thing, because it all lives on the Google Cloud platform. Then the next step around data enrichment. So with the data that we've got in the database, we enriched it by doing things like geocoding. So taking the information in terms of latitude and longitude and plotting that onto the map. There are other options in CARTO in terms of other third-party data streams that they make available. So things like demographics or transaction information. Then the next step around analysis. So the thing we use there, so this is connecting lines to points or running cluster analysis or outlier analysis and these sorts of things. So a lot of spatial or location-based analysis. We created what you'd almost call an origin and destination matrix. So between the purchase location and the product location, we connected those and created a matrix, a spatial matrix, and that will be one of the demos I'll show. And then once you've got that data, you've analyzed it, the next step is then to visualize it. So that's where we're using CARTO Builder. So that's their web-based graphical interface for us to share the maps. And then finally, the last step, we didn't get to this point really, but integration, so putting it back into their systems. So perhaps in the future with Big Red Group, we may look to integrate it back into maybe into their CRM or into one of their other cloud databases, but giving them the analytics, pushing it back into an interface they're familiar with. So now I'll run you through the three use cases. So these are the three we sort of narrowed down. So the first one is actually just purely looking at the product information. So this isn't using any Google Analytics information. And so what we've done here is visualized the product locations. So you can see on the map there, just a screenshot out from the demo. Essentially, we're displaying the product locations by category, subcategory, and the number of participants. And so the sort of, I suppose, the purpose behind this, or the questions you'd be answering, are things around the gaps. So we might, Big Red Group might find that they don't offer certain categories in some areas. So there might be something that their team can go out and I guess give a little bit more attention to, or research further. So now we'll run you through a live demo here. So to begin with, you can see there's the pins on the map that are colored based on their category. So the category up in the top right-hand corner, left-hand corner there, sorry, the legend, just shows you the colors that they correspond to. So there's obviously a lot of information on the map and there's a lot of colors. But what we'll do now is sort of filter down. So we've just zoomed in here into Victoria. And now what we'll do is take a look by category. So we'll filter by outdoor activities. And so now we can see these are just the pins that relate to products that are classified as outdoor activities. We've got a pop-up window there that gives us a bit of information about it. So in terms of the number of participants and that sort of thing. And yeah, we'll sort of take a look through some of those. Again, valuable insight so they can understand where is the product, what is the product, and yeah, like I was saying, looking at gaps. Perhaps there's certain areas where a purchaser might want to purchase that type of product, but they're not able to, or it's further away than they'd like. So then the next step, we'll look and filter through by a subcategory. So this is a level 2 sort of category. So this is beauty treatments. So again, we're looking across Australia at each of the pins that relate to beauty treatments. So just purely the location of those. We can see the spread across Australia. And so for this one, we'll take a look over here in Perth. So we can see there's a couple of beauty treatments available. I mean, perhaps as an example, there's sort of a lack to the south of Perth, and so there's quite a large population there. So perhaps that's somewhere that the Red Balloon sales team could take a look at. So that's something that's an example of some of the insights they can get out of it. And so what we've done now is just removed the category filter, so we can see all of the products again. And then what we'll do finally is just filter by the number of participants. So we'll go down and find all of the products that have 6 participants across Australia. So there you can see they're split by category still. So the colours correspond to the category, and these all have 6 participants for the product that you purchase. And then what we'll do is filter by adventure sports. So we're filtering twice here. So we're drilling down into the data by 6 participants and by adventure sports. And you can see there's sort of a 1 or 2 sort of across the East Coast. There's a couple there, nothing in Adelaide or Tasmania or up in Brisbane, for example. So again, it's just areas that they can, the Big Red Group can put some attention to. And perhaps, yeah, it gives them some leads for their sales team to go and find new suppliers for experiences. So that's sort of the end of the first demo. So this, like I was saying, that wasn't using any Google Analytics data. The second one is using Google Analytics data. So this is the first one where we're making use of the buyer behavior. So the whole emphasis on this part of it is looking at cart abandonment and looking at purchase and visit information. So this is purely by city. So anytime someone opens the page, adds something to their cart or visits a product on the Red Balloon website, that gets tagged as Ash went through. It also tags an IP address, so it's the nearest city for them. So even if someone lives 50 kilometers from a city, that's still, if that's their closest major city, then that's going to be the where their IP address would be tagged back to. And so, yeah, what we're going to be answering here are things like where do we see the most demand, and things like where are our highest cart abandonment levels. So for Big Red Group, this is a place, again, for them to spend some attention on certain cities, perhaps where they're having more success, and maybe others where they need to, there might be marketing and that sort of thing that can support their efforts there. So to begin with, we can just see the bubbles or the circles there. So we've just sized those based on the number of unique purchases. So obviously places like Sydney and Melbourne, Canberra, for example, they're all going to have a higher number of adds to cart and higher number of purchases. Then what we'll do now is, once we take a look through the Central Coast, so we're just simply selecting the pop-up for each city. We'll then jump out and we'll take a look in across the same data, but what we're going to do is actually style it. So CARTO has an auto styling feature, which enables you to select an attribute and then style based on that. So we've just styled based on the cart abandonment rates. So now you can see the darker colors, so going through to red, it means there's a higher cart abandonment rate in that city versus the lighter colors where that's a lower cart abandonment rate. So some of the interesting points here are probably some of the smaller cities where you can see there's sort of an equal number of purchases based on the size of the circle, but some of them have a much darker color or a much higher cart abandonment rate. So there's sort of areas that perhaps Red Balloon can say, what products are we offering in that area? Do we need to improve that? We need to make it more compelling, I suppose, for the users to proceed with their purchase, for example. And then the next demo, so this will be the final one, is the origin destination, or what we would sort of calling the product purchase location matrix. So this is the connection between the product location and the purchase city. And so this is really a combination of the product information from the data warehouse that the Big Red Group have, and then also the Google Analytics data that we got through the connector. And so, yeah, we've simply connected those by lines, and then we've styled it based on the line thickness to show the number of purchases of that product to the city. So the questions we're sort of answering is around which products receive the most demand from which cities, and what are the trends by product across the city. So, for example, people in Melbourne or Victoria, what do they want to purchase? Where do they travel to? And what sort of categories are they purchasing? So there's some really valuable insights on a city level and then also on a product level. So it comes from both perspectives in this case.
Yeah,
so
before you
start,
I was just going to say, this for us is super valuable information. I mean, we look to really build deep connections with our suppliers and partner with them. So for example, Balloonâ Loft in the Hunter Valley, we've been partnered with them for the last 20 years. So we really look to provide this insight back to them, and if they're looking for expansion opportunities, and to help support them in their own marketing activities, helping them to know where people are coming from is massive. And the other area where this is really going to help us is in terms of the trans-Tasman bubble, as people are referring to it, post-COVID. So you can see there the beginning of lines from how many people are traveling from New Zealand to visit us and our products here. So yeah, it's really fascinating data, which has a massive tangible impact to us now.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for that insight, Mark. So yeah, in this example, so this is like I was saying, so this is the product purchase location matrix. So we've just filtered down here. I've just filtered down to Brisbane. So you can see these are all purchases. Those blue dots are all the purchases that were made from Brisbane, which is obviously the red point there. So we just filtered down to that. You can see there's a count in terms of the number of purchases from Brisbane. So 9,100, approximately 9,100 purchases. What we'll then do is go in to Bendigo, for example. So I've just selected a city. So obviously a smaller city, so not one of the capital cities. And so their purchases mainly sort of correspond with the locations around Victoria. So they're making purchases, majority of them in Melbourne or nearby. So we'll just zoom in here and take a little bit of a closer look. We can actually select each one of these lines. So these connect from Bendigo to the product that was purchased. So for example, a gin distillery tour, or perhaps yeah, any of the other products, the lines that connect those. So yeah, it's just interesting to observe a smaller city, more of a state-based connection versus the capitals, which connect to the rest of the country. Then the next thing we'll do is look by into the distances. So we're just taking a look here to have a look at the shorter distances. So these are within a state. So this shows the links within each state. So these are shorter matrix lengths. So the distance between the product and the purchase. So this just spells out sort of within a state what are the links like. So for example, in Brisbane, you can see that there's a really strong connection through to the Gold Coast. Of course, you know, very popular, and there's a lot of experiences to be had there. And again, we can select each one of the lines and bring up a pop-up like I just did there to view the specific information for that product. And so now what we'll do, we'll just jump out and then we'll be removing that filter. So you can see that those links there for each state and sort of where some of the popular connections are. So now what we'll do is filter down by a product. So we'll go in and select, for example, the Sydney Harbour cruise. And so what this tells us is for that one product, where the purchase is being made from. So the product location is obviously in Sydney on the harbour. And so now we can see going across to Perth, over to Adelaide, over to Melbourne, we can see where the majority of their demand comes from. And so, I mean, in discussions with Mark, he mentioned this is the sort of thing that the product suppliers probably don't really know much about in terms of, we're serving customers from these areas. So this is some really valuable intel for them as well. So it's something that they can pass back to their product suppliers and give them extra intel or extra insights. And so yeah, that's the most popular product, and that's why we chose that, just purely because that's the it had the most purchases. So we're able to view that information there. And then just the last use case here. So still on the same map. So I think we just had a little mix up with the videos, but that's okay. Yeah, and so this last one, so like I said, so this is on the same map. What I'm going to do here is just filter down to Sydney. So again, we can see where the products that were purchased in Sydney are located. So you can see there's a strong link in the state, and then up to Brisbane and over to Melbourne. And so then what we'll do is actually filter down for Sydney. We'll look at by category, where are people in Sydney purchasing a certain category of product. So this is all of the products. And so now we'll go in and choose something like, let's say water sports, which is in the first category, so the level 1. We can go in and select that information, and that's going to filter down those products and just show us the water sports products. So now you can see in Sydney, most people are traveling up north, sort of up to the Cairns or Brisbane or Gold Coast, or perhaps along the north coast, so Newcastle and those sort of spots, Nelson Bay and whatnot. So just getting an understanding of the people in Sydney, who are they, where are they purchasing products, and this can inform things around marketing and that sort of thing. So getting an understanding of your customer or the customers that Red Balloon service. And so, yeah, the next thing we'll do here is just remove the category and the city filters. So again, we're back to all of the data showing all of the connections. And so the next thing we'll go in and do is then select, again, we'll go in and select Bendigo. So we'll just use that as an example, or it's a bit of a case study here. So we'll filter by that. So this is all the purchases for Bendigo again. We'll jump into there. And so again, what we'll see here is being able to select the information that's relevant to Bendigo. So these are all of the products and the links between those. So where people in Bendigo have purchased things, and like I mentioned earlier, so that's mainly within the state, so going down to Victoria. And then the last thing I mentioned here that I'll mention here is, like I said, it's valuable intel for the product owners themselves. So we'll go in and select one more product. So this will be the gin distillery tour. So we'll select that product, and then we'll be able to see all of the cities that was purchased from. So we select that there, and then we can go in and view the connections between that product and all of the cities. So yeah, really valuable intel for them to understand where they're serving their customers, where they need to market to. So if they're doing some social media marketing or that sort of thing, and they're going to choose certain cities to target, then now they know where they're getting most of their demand from, sort of which cities the majority of it comes from, and perhaps new areas that they could target for growth. So yeah, that sort of brings us to the end of most of the demos. So I think we'll jump to some questions now. So I'll hand back over to Sarah.
Thanks, Dion. Thank you all very much, Ash, Mark and Dion, for taking part in this. We are going to have some questions now for our panelists. So we've had a few come through already, but if you do want to ask a question, now is a great time for you to do that. So just to remind you, it's in the right-hand, on the right-hand side of your screen, you should have your GoToWebinar control panel. We've only got a few minutes for questions, so I'm going to dive right in. Ash, this one's probably best suited for you, which we've had a couple of industry-specific questions come through in terms of Google Analytics. So obviously we've looked at an example with Big Red Group today on sort of looking at purchasing and e-commerce and that type of data. We've had two pretty specific questions. One is from a retailer who has asked us what are some of the other retail stories you can tell from Google Analytics that we might not have seen today, and the other one is a government related question. How can government use this information and put it on the map?
Sure, so if we take it from a retail perspective, obviously we were looking at transactions today, but you can very easily pivot to either product views or just simply focusing on that cart abandonment rate metric. So the actual metric you use to value the endpoints can be very easily pivoted. It will all depend on if you have enhanced e-commerce within Google Analytics setup, and that's where having a partner such as Starruns Deep helps set that up for you from a tracking perspective. From a governmental perspective, it's very easy again to shift focus to be, say, more site engagement. So if you want to set the condition to be, okay, I only want to look at sessions where users have successfully stayed for longer than 2 minutes and 35 seconds, or they viewed more than 6 pages per session, then you can easily pivot from an e-commerce transaction to the user has successfully engaged with my content.
Thank you, Ash. We've had a question come through. Well, actually, I'm going to go to Mark for this question, and that is a question for you, Mark, from Steve. And Steve has asked you about how Big Red Group plans to use this data now. I know you kind of touched on this before, but moving into post-pandemic, obviously the government is probably very close now to announcing the borders reopening. And Steve would like to know how you plan on using this data.
Cool. Yeah, it's a great question, and we're in the process now of imagining what our product needs to look like in a post-COVID environment. So really understanding how far people were traveling before is going to be really important for that. And you can see from just some of the map that some of the regional areas of the country aren't so densely populated with product. So that's absolutely a strategy at the moment, is to look at how we provide a more holistic product offering in all areas of the country. So that's one. And as I said, the other one is really that trans-Tasman bubble that everyone's talking about at the moment. And we do see that as a strategic opportunity for us to look at. So yeah, understanding how people have traveled in the past is really useful to help understand how we will both source product and how we go to market, and what our messaging and campaigns look like to New Zealand over the coming weeks and months.
Great, thanks, Mark. We have a question from Darren, and Dion, you're probably the best person for this. His question is the data itself copied from BigQuery across to CARTO and queried from CARTO data store? Also, is BigQuery the purpose of just helping get the GA data to CARTO?
That's a good question, Darren. And yeah, essentially the way that the CARTO connector works is that, or the BigQuery CARTO connector works is that what gets pushed into CARTO is the output from BigQuery. So BigQuery is actually doing all of the processing. So even within the connector, when we ran that SQL query, that's BigQuery doing the work. So that you get the advantage of the really quick sort of querying that BigQuery offers. And then it simply says, this is the output of that query, or this is the response from that query. Then that gets pushed into the CARTO data store or into the CARTO database. And then that gets indexed and prepared for spatial data visualization and analysis. So yeah, the majority of it is being done by BigQuery, and then it's just pushed into CARTO as the output at the end of the day. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And thanks, Darren, for the question. We have time for maybe 2 more questions. We are running a little over time, but I've got one here for Mark. This question comes from Michelle. And Michelle just wanted to know, Mark, couldn't you have seen all the information that you saw on the map by what you've seen here in the demo today, and obviously what you've worked on with Dion? She wants to know how hard it would have been to have seen this without CARTO.
Yeah, so like Dion mentioned, some of this is definitely possible with other BI tools, but that filtering and the ability to show the relationships it is a bit harder, and it's just the time it takes to prep the data. So while I do think it's possible, I've been really pleased with the speed at which we can get some insight out of CARTO and Liveli team. So that's my view. Dion, I'm sure you've got a bit more to say on that if you had anything to add.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, given it's sort of our first time working with GA data, so it's been really fascinating. But yeah, based on discussions with, particularly with the DRD team, so with Ash, we had a really lengthy discussion when we caught up in person, and yeah, we sort of found out that yeah, a lot of this location data, it's there, but it's not displayed or visualized in a logical way, or in a way that really enables you to get meaning out of it. And so this is really the reason why the whole webinar came around. So there is some really basic visualization in BigQuery that, like Sarah showed in that the GIF at the start. But yeah, CARTO obviously takes it much further than that and much more precise.
Great. Okay, well, that's all we've got time for. We have gone 5 minutes over. I'd really like to thank all of you for being on the webinar today. We had a great response to this topic, so I feel like there's a lot of people probably experiencing or questioning how they could be using that GA data set a little bit better. We're available to chat with anyone that has questions about their Google Analytics data. Dion and Ash's email addresses are up on the screen now, so if you have any questions about CARTO or about BigQuery, you can get in touch with Dion, but also we would encourage anyone to get in touch with Ash who has questions about using Google Analytics or GA360, who needs a partner in Google for marketing, because those guys, I reckon, are the best partner out there. And I'm not just saying that, but they really do love what they do, and working with them is always a huge pleasure. You can follow Liveli on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. We're going to reach out to you soon with the recording for this, and we will be available for any questions that you have, like I said, moving forward. So thank you all very much. Thanks, Mark, Ash, and Dion, for your time, and we'll leave it there for today. Have a wonderful afternoon.